Think about how much we use our digital devices every day. You might not realize it, but it's tied into almost every single thing that we do. Staying connected with our friends and our family, using online banking, shopping online, mobile transactions, education, assignments, things like that. We use it in almost every aspect of our life. Now take that and imagine if every single thing on the internet was not in a language that you could understand. You may have access to that digital device, you may have your phone, but is it worth anything if you can't understand what your phone is trying to tell you?
Across East Africa, access to the digital world is shaped by where you live, what you earn, and the tools available to you. In major cities, young people stream classes, apply for jobs, and run entire businesses from their phones. But in rural regions, where roads are long, electricity is inconsistent, and mobile towers are few, connection is fragile. A single weak signal can limit a student's education, a farmer's market price, or a family's access to vital information. Economic barriers deepen the divide. Even when networks reach a community, the cost of data or basic smartphones can equal days of income. And cultural realities, local languages, trust in technology, and traditional ways of sharing information shape whether digital tools are fully embraced or remain out of reach.
The East African region is home to so much indigenous culture. Over 160 unique indigenous cultures are contained in that area, and a lot of that is due to the development that they faced in their early history. Many indigenous peoples lived in Central Africa and migrated east to get the benefits of the coast in the Indian Ocean. In the early first millennium, these tribes experienced constant contact with merchants from the Indian Ocean, and by the second millennium, they were engaging in long-distance trade across the Indian Ocean. Because of this long-distance trade and the materials of the region, they were able to develop into these very advanced societies, and they were highly independent in their social hierarchy. This was until colonial powers came into the region in the 16th century, starting with the Portuguese. They came into the region and began extorting a lot of the raw materials in the area. They separated a lot of these indigenous tribes and placed these arbitrary lines in the ground as to where different colonial powers would be located. These nations eventually pulled out of Africa in the late 1960s, and that's where we start to see nations like Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania start to develop and gain their independence. However, despite gaining this independence, so much of their culture and society was damaged from European colonial rule. For example, infrastructure was built to only extort materials and send them to Europe. Governance systems, they were centralized in these metropolitan areas where European powers were gaining the most revenue and the most income. Information systems, censuses, and all these kinds of things. Education was all just centralized into metropolitan areas, and that's where we start to see the digital divide.
East African governments should require that all public health updates and all policy updates just be translated online. It's very difficult even now to find good translations or even translations at all. Most are in English, and that is certainly one of the harder aspects of life.
We can already see AI tools being used to help bridge the linguistic gap forming. Historically, African languages have been excluded in digital data sets, which prevents search engines and translation tools from identifying local languages. However, there are initiatives being formed to help combat this issue, such as Common Voice, Masakin, and African Storybook. Each one of these projects aims to use AI to identify these languages and register even the most unpopular languages in each data set.
These countries should also expand into online spaces, meaning the introduction of electricity for a lot of these communities. Access to electricity and device ownership is one of the largest reasons that this region has a lack of digital readiness. Now, one of the ways to combat this is public and private partnerships, working to increase electricity grids, introducing mobile coverage. Media outlets can support this by running positive campaigns that show how important digital literacy is for education, jobs, and community work.
One way to tackle the digital divide in Eastern Africa is to actively teach the members of the Eastern African community proper digital literacy. This starts in younger students' education curriculums, starting with teaching kids how to understand AI models, how to recognize false information, how to use the internet for things like mobile banking and finding a job, and even something as simple as writing an essay would go a huge way in educating that population. Furthermore, something that should be done is teaching people by using different forms and different methods of media. 17% of East Africans actually feel prepared for online learning, while 55% feel that they are not prepared to begin online learning. To combat this, a hybrid model can be used to teach people in the Eastern African region how to use technology. Using different forms of media can create an inclusive approach to teaching the Eastern African region how to use online digital media. For example, you could teach using radio broadcast, SMS updates, and printed materials so that those people who are familiar with those forms of media wouldn't feel left behind.
The digital divide in East Africa is not an unsolvable problem. It's a challenge that demands commitment, investment, and a belief that every community deserves the chance to connect. As we've seen, progress is already underway, driven by partnerships, local innovation, and the voices working to make this issue impossible to ignore. But closing the gap will take all of us, governments, companies, storytellers, and citizens. When connection becomes universal, opportunity does too. And the future of East Africa depends on making that vision a reality.